Thank goodness, there's a lot of people here. Last Sunday I thought was a lot. I think there's more this Sunday. Yeah. All right. All right. So we are in a series on the power of the tongue. Believe it or not, this is message 6 of that series.
Nice job, Randy.
So the first 5 messages we dealt with the power of the tongue against ourselves. 5 whole messages we talked about words we speak against ourselves and words in our mind that we allow to be there by not combating them and not seeking out help. And I just want to encourage you as we're shifting directions today, and we're going to talk about parenting with a loving tongue, and we're going to spend some weeks on that. Okay, but I want to encourage you, if during those 4 weeks any of that was stirred up in you and you realized, wow, I really want to get freedom in this, from all the things we looked at, anxiety and discouragement and apathy and suicidal thoughts, tortured thoughts, all the things we looked at, panic attacks. If you realize, wow, yeah, I have those struggles and I want to get free, I just encourage you, just because we're turning page, and for a lot of you, those messages were really encouraging and helped you, I encourage you, if you didn't listen to all of them, go back and re-listen to them, especially if you're struggling in those areas, and find someone that you can meet with at least every other week. Find someone that you can talk to and get things off your chest and receive prayer. And I'm thrilled to hear that there's already multiple people who have done that. So thank you for doing that. That's awesome. And I just encourage you, don't give up on it. Okay, don't give up on it. If that's still something you're struggling with, you need to keep fighting the battle. Okay, we want to see freedom over it. Okay? Yeah? So, in parenting, yes, I only have a 6 and a 4 and a 2-year-old, but I happen to be an expert on parenting. Why? Because I think I happen to have 2 of the most amazing parents that have ever walked the earth. And I learned a lot from them growing up. And I think I'm doing okay myself. I'm trying, I'm tripping and stumbling through it. So we're going to spend a couple weeks on this. And today, for our ministry time, our last 15 minutes, we're actually just going to do question and answer time. So I want you ahead of time to be thinking of question and answer questions, not the answers. Just to be thinking of questions pertaining to parenting. And I understand that's a wide range. It could be about your rebellious teenager, or it could be about your little 2-year-old throwing a tantrum. How the heck do I deal with it? And me and Mom will be answering those questions. I think we'll hopefully have a lot of wisdom to give you. So just be thinking of it. And again, it doesn't have to pertain just to your family, but you might just have one in general. Like, how do you deal with a kid if they're doing this or that? Or how do you do this or that? Or what can I do in this situation? And we're going to give advice for those last 15 minutes, okay? Make sense? So as I speak, and I'm going to have Mom share too. She's going to share for the first 10 minutes. But as we're speaking on it, if questions come up, go ahead and write them down or put them on your phone, okay? Yeah? You can pray. Me? Okay, I'll pray. Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day. God, I just thank you for those 5 weeks that we spent on really trying to receive inner healing for ourselves and the greatest backstabber, our own tongue, and our own thoughts against ourselves. And God, I thank you for the freedom that people did experience and for the ongoing plan, hopefully, that many of them are formulating to say, I'm going to keep attacking this. I'm going to keep getting prayer until, as Dad always taught us, you pray until you see the breakthrough. And God, I just ask that people would be encouraged to do that. Lord, I just ask that you would open our hearts and minds in this area of parenting. And everybody is in different stages and walks in life, but this can apply to all of us still, Lord. And so I just ask that you would open our hearts and minds to receive what you would say to us on this matter. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Morning, everybody. Now we still have
some people with this flu, though, so keep praying. Jody is still in the hospital with pneumonia, and I believe Malcolm has got this really bad flu thing that goes right to your chest, and Caleb, and I'm sure there are many others, so those are just the ones I know about. So everybody keep praying for that to get through here. Okay, so what I'm going to share, he just asked me to share one thing about parenting and the tongue, and as I was praying about it, what came to me, and I realize now it kind of ties together what we have been talking about the last few weeks. And so life and death are in the power of the tongue, and you with your tongue, and again, let me just say, because there's always people here where our kids are raised, or some who don't have any children, but God has put people in all of our lives to parent. Whether it's nieces, nephews, neighborhood kids, you work and there's younger ones. There were always other people parenting me besides my parents. And as an adult especially, there were a lot of people that parented me spiritually when my parents were not able to be there for that. So anyways, this pertains to all of us, because we are all parenting someone, or should be. So our tongue has the power to build up or tear down our children. And the enemy is constantly attacking a child's sense of value and worth to God. Some kids are more susceptible to this. In my own family, I had one child that was particularly susceptible to this throughout the years. But every child, just like Eve in the garden, is going to have the enemy come in and tell them that God doesn't really know what's best for you. God doesn't really love you. There's another way to do things. And so what this translates into is our kids going out and trying to find worth and value and acceptance from someone other than God, from their parents, from their church family, trying to be accepted however they can. And again, this can happen to any child, whether they've been loved and supported and parented and praised their whole life growing up. They can still end up, and I remember I was shocked seeing as one of my own children, feeling that they're ugly and that they're not good at things and they're worthless, no matter what everybody has told them. And I know this is because this is the enemy's tricks from the beginning of time towards us to draw us away from the Father and his love for us. So this is why we constantly need to be speaking life words into our kids and truth words, the truth about who they are in Christ. The truth about God's love for them, that he knit them together in their mother's womb, how much he loves them, how they're the apple of his eye. We need to be speaking these truths into them as they grow up, because when we do this, we are giving them ammunition to fight the lies of the enemy. Jesus, that's how he fought the enemy when he tried to tell him that your father doesn't know what's best for you. I have a way to make you popular, and everybody's going to love you, and you're going to be accepted, and you're going to be powerful. He used the truth that his father had spoken to him, and he spoke that, and that was how he defeated the enemy. So we've got to do this from an early age. Any children that are in your life, fill them with life words about how much you care about them, about how much the Father cares about them. Point out to them the things that they do well. We so often point out when mistakes are made, and we do need to do that and help make correction. But we need to point out all the beautiful, amazing things about the kids in our lives. Okay, and it's super important too because of the way that a word is a sword. We know that the word is a sword, and so we need to not just speak, good, loving, kind words to our kids, but we need to get the word of God into them. through repetition, through songs, just getting simple scriptures into them from an early age and more as they grow older. And when we do this, these truths from the Bible are like, we are like giving them this stockpile of weapons so that when the enemy comes against them, they have something. They have that sword to pull out and it's ready. And so I want to admonish you parents by regularly having your kids in Sunday school, bringing them to Destiny Kids, having them in youth group regularly. By doing this, you are giving them something that is so valuable. Because it's important for us to speak truth and words of life into our kids, but they also need to be hearing it other places because they are hearing the other stuff everywhere they go. And I don't care if your kids tell you they've got a bad Sunday school teacher, or it's boring, or the other kids don't like me. Those are like really good teachable moments for your kids and opportunities for them to grow. But you need to know that that's the enemy trying to get them away from another place where they're going to hear life words. When they're watching TV, when they're on their phones or their iPads or when they're at school, they're not getting filled with life words. We have these small opportunities to do that. So I encourage you parents to do that. Fill your kids with those words. You know, there really is an epidemic of teen suicide in our nation. And we had it hit our valley really hard a few years back. And over the years, I worked with youth through the Christian school and through the youth group for 23 years. Talked to a lot of kids struggling with suicidal thoughts or just thoughts of worthlessness. And what they used to fight that were those life words, those scriptures that they knew. And they knew from the word that it was the house of God where they were going to get answers, where they would begin to turn to their friends in youth group, or who would lead them to their parents or lead them to another youth leader. And every child that commits suicide, every adult that commits suicide, has these kind of thoughts going through their head and need that arsenal of weapons against them. When I think about my son getting in that moment where he was having those horrible panic attacks and where those intrusive thoughts, those intense thoughts of suicide came into him so strongly, what would have happened if he had not had those weapons ready? He had had years and years. And one of the ways that we do it, parents, is not just by what we speak, but you need to be doers of the word and not hearers only. Your kids need to see that even when it's hard, even when it's not the easiest thing for you to do, you do what God tells you to do. Because when they get in that moment where the enemy's telling them there's an easier way out, they're going to remember that. And then you live in a personal relationship with Jesus where you're not only hearing from the word, but you're talking to God and listening. And your kids see that you're changing, and that when you do something to them and God convicts you of it, you make it right away and you apologize to them. That stuff is going to come back to your kids. Those are the weapons that we're giving our kids. So anyhow, this is an age-old attack that is going to be against your kids. And I remember when my kids were just these sweet little kids, just hugging on them and loving them, and they were so happy all the time. I had no idea what they were going to be facing as they went into junior high and their teen years. And for one of mine, it started at 6, 7. I started having a lot of this type of attack. And I am so glad, though, that I did know about these life words and that I was putting them into my children so that they have that to battle. So I just encourage you to listen up, because life and death is in the power of the tongue, and we can really change our kids' future by the words we speak to them.
Amen. Good. So apparently I have a ton to say on this subject, which I was shocked as I came up to it, and I didn't know what route I was going to go after we addressed the tongue against ourselves. And I knew that's what I wanted to address first, because if your tongue against yourself is distorted and evil against yourself, that's going to distort the way you see everybody else. So I was like, we got to get that fixed first. And then, it just struck me as I was looking at different subjects and different routes I could go. I just thought, if you can't fix your tongue in your own house, your religion is worthless. Your relationship with God is a fraud. If you can't control it amongst your own people that you are supposed to be the most loving towards, and yet we find oftentimes they're the people that can most hurt us and that we can most hurt. And if we can't fix it in our homesteading, then something's wrong in our relationship with God. And we need help, and we need to have this fixed. So we're going to look at a lot of things in this series. I don't know how many weeks I'm going to spend on it. I'm even going to have a time where we bring some of our kids out early, and we're going to repent to them as parents for wrongs that we've done to them. And this is something I've made a habit of doing in my life, and I learned from my parents. Because when they did wrong, they repented. They told me, hey, we blew it. We're sorry. Can you forgive us? A lot of parents, that's a foreign thing to them. I just want you to know this can apply to everyone. Like Mom said, that was in my notes, but is that you all know kids. And you're all going to encounter kids in life, and so this can apply to all of us, what we're going to be learning on this. So this message is called, I didn't tell you yet, I'm sorry. This message I'm calling is called Obedient Parents Yield Obedient Children. So this message is not to kids about they need to be obedient. And why do you think that is? Because children are constantly taught to obey. That's what they know. Society tells them obey, their parents tell them obey, and it's constantly on them. And even if they are rebellious, sometimes it's because of that. They want to have a free will. We all want free will, right? Yeah. Everybody does. And that's why we have to be understanding towards kids. That's a heavy thing to place on them to obey. It's not a bad thing, but they know that's what society expects. They know that's what their parents expect. But parents, sometimes we forget we have a mandate from God to obey. We have a mandate to obey God in all things. And I see that the problem is a lot of parents aren't willing to obey God. And that is going to be reflected on their children. When you have children, your wants, your desires, and your dreams are supposed to shift off of yourself and onto them. That is the God-mandated way, is that you are looking to their future now and looking to their desires. You're looking to what they want. I'm not talking about in a bad way, giving them anything they want, but your desire is fixed towards them. And Mom and Dad modeled this for us, is that, you would always say, I want my kids to go far beyond where I've ever gone in the Lord. I want the best for them. And everything they did, I shared this at Dad's funeral, but I felt like I was the center of his world. Everything was about having fun with his kids. Everything was about teaching us and loving us. And so they modeled that very well. But the problem is, a lot of us aren't willing to shift our wants and dreams and desires onto our kids, even though that is what we're supposed to do. And it's supposed to be this beautiful cycle where we do that and we raise our kids, and then as they grow and mature, and one day they're older, they realize, wow, Mom and Dad were doing that for me. And then as Mom and Dad get older, the kids take care of Mom and Dad. And there's this beautiful exchange back and forth. Do you see that? That's how it's supposed to work. This should be easy for us as believers. We're followers of Jesus. We were already supposed to have surrendered all your desires, wants, and needs to Jesus, right? So it should be easy when your kids come along to say, I'm going to shift all my desires, hopes, and dreams into my kids. They come first. And yet it's hard for us sometimes, right? I had to learn that, okay, it's, I don't get to do everything I always got to do, and that's perfectly fine. It's a good thing. I have to shift towards them. Already said that. We're going to take 15 minutes at the end. So again, if questions are coming up as we go along, or you just have questions about raising your kids and stuff, or how do I handle this situation or that, go ahead and write it down, put it on your phone, whatever. I already said all this. All right, so a vital part of parenting is humility. We have to be humble and recognize that we need God's help. And I'm having Mom and I answer questions today, but I just want to say, we're not perfect parents by any means. Mom and Dad, in my opinion, are the greatest parents I've ever come across. Even in short interactions with other parents, I have seen that it just seems Mom and Dad have always been more gracious, stern, said what they meant, and I just love them. And so I have that esteem for them, but I can tell you they weren't perfect parents. They made mistakes, and they could tell you the same. That of course they made mistakes, but humility in them recognized when they made mistakes and actually apologized to us as kids when they were making mistakes. And so that's a vital part of parenting, and that speaks so much to your kids. When you can actually go to your child and say, I have blown it. I blew it. I hurt you. The way I spoke. I've said this to Enoch multiple times. And I've said this before, but I never once can remember a time where Mom or Dad called me a name. Never. Where they got angry and called me a brat. Anything like that. Never called a name by either of them in all my life. Never happened. And likewise, I don't call my kids names in any way. But there's a big difference between being stern with your child and being a jerk. We all understand that, right? You can be stern for good reason, but you can also go too far and lose your temper and be a jerk. And so I've had multiple times where even though my son did wrong and it warranted discipline in a sense, I went too far. And instead of saying, you did this and this, son, and that's why I did that, no, I took him aside and I sat down with him and said, I am never allowed to talk to you like that, son. That is not okay. And I'm not allowed to treat you that way. Can you forgive me? And he's always been able to forgive me very fast. Because kids are amazing like that. The kingdom of heaven belongs to them. We can learn a lot from them. So, key part of parenting, humility, recognize you're going to make mistakes. And you have made mistakes. And that's okay. And this is really vital, and I already said it, but we have to repent to our kids when we blow it. You can love and cherish your kids without spoiling them. Okay? You can love and cherish them. I always felt loved and cherished by Mom and Dad, but we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And typically at Christmas, almost all of my good friends had far more gifts than me. Far more. And I still felt incredibly loved and cherished and grateful because Mom and Dad taught me to be grateful and thankful for everything we got. And so they were loving and kind, but they didn't spoil us. And I'm not saying all my friends were spoiled. I'm just saying my parents didn't have as much money, and that's fine. Letting a kid do whatever they want. And again, I'm not hitting on a ton of verses today. I just want to hit like more of a broader sense. But as I was typing up all this week, I was like, man, I have a ton to say on this. And it's all good. It's all going to be good every week, okay? And we want this is vital. These are the next generation of kids. And one of the most beautiful pictures of the kingdom that we have is what God told us, that the man and the woman become one flesh and they cleave to one another for life. That's the mandated way it's supposed to go, and the wife submits to the husband, but the husband has the higher calling to lay down his life for his wife as Christ laid down his life for the church. That's a high call. And that is a beautiful picture, and he relates it to Christ doing that for us, the bride, his church. And so it's a picture of how it's supposed to be. And then, as the head of the family, we are supposed to be raising our kids in the Lord and loving them and teaching them well. And if you're doing that, you're producing offspring that are going to go and produce more good offspring. You can see this clear example from my grandma and grandpa. And the generations that have spread out to where now a family gathering can be 40 people. And typically in that group of 40 people, every single one of them is walking with the Lord today. Every single one of them has a love for God today. Because they were raised in authentic love for the Lord, an authentic lifestyle. And like Mom said, not just in words, but we saw it in actions, that they truly loved God and they lived out what they taught us. Make sense? And so it's a beautiful picture of the kingdom and how you can really affect this earth with the kingdom of God. So letting a kid do whatever they want, that isn't love. Likewise, restricting them to do exactly what you think they should do, that's also not love. You might say, well then, how do I love my kids? This is an incredibly nuanced question, and that's why we're taking time on this subject. Because that is a loaded question, because, as you know, we are all individuals. We are all fearfully and wonderfully made, and we all interact with one another, and I've shared this before. A lot of times, a lot of believers, you're not blatantly sinning in certain ways. If you are blatantly sinning in a certain way, repent of that. If it's shown in the Word that it's a sin. But other times, it's simply miscommunications is where hurts come from the body. It's that I communicated something to Christy, and there was zero motive in my heart to hurt her, but somehow she received it differently, and it hurt her. And then she held on to that, and she told everybody. But you see, all that happened was an actual miscommunication. And it's going to be the same thing with every child that you raise. And this can be even, if you're grown and your kids are adults, it's still the same thing. Each one of them are individuals, and they're going to respond differently to different words and different means of discipline. They're all going to respond differently. Does that make sense? So it's really a loaded question on how do I love my kids? And how do I love them well? Said all this. Your grown adult kids, for those of you who have grown adult kids, they still desire your love. They still desire your approval and your affection. I see this now. I just turned 30 last week. But I see this now with all my friends that I grew up with, even as adults. They long for affection from their parents still. They long to be with their parents. And if there's a rift in the relationship, that hurts them. And they wish that rift wasn't there. And so even as adults, this can apply to you with your grown kids. You guys have heard of the 5 love languages, yes? Who has not heard of that? 5 love languages? Okay, only a few, that's fine. I'm going to share them with you today because they're really important and I have a point to make on them. So, there are more love languages than the 5 love languages. But this is, I think it's a book somebody wrote. I haven't even read it. But here's the 5 love languages that they talked about. Affirming words. For some people, that is their greatest love language, is to hear affirming words. And when they hear affirming words from you, in their brain it equals, I'm loved. When they hear, I've had to learn what is my wife really respond to in love language, in these different things. And I found that I constantly affirm her, constantly tell her she's beautiful, constantly tell her how much I love her. So affirming words. Acts of service, that's like me cleaning the house for my wife, or her cleaning for me, or me making lunch for the kids and things like that. And I teach my kids how important that it is and how we're doing that for them because we love them. And I don't like when I hear parents being like, I do this and this for you and you're not grateful. That's not how you go about it. You're not going to make them grateful that way. But it is an understanding tone and an understanding, loving way of just showing them, not when you're upset, not when they're being bad, but in those good times. In those good times, just saying like, we do this for you because we love you. And, I didn't have to make you this lunch, but I want to because I love you. And so acts of service. And I've already found, like with Enoch, he said to me the other day, because he asks us sometimes, why do you have to work so much? Why are you gone? And I always give him the same two answers. I say, one is we want to have enough money so we can give to kids in need. And we do. We give to kids in need. And I say, we have an abundance. You have so much, Enoch. And I was like, there are kids that are literally starving. And because me and Mom make that extra money, we send it to those kids and they don't starve. Like, isn't that cool? So that's always the first reason I give him. And the second is, you won't be eating this food right now if we don't work for it. And I say, so that's why we have to. We want to stay here with you. We want to be with you. But we have to go and work so that we can feed you and take care of you and love you properly. And so he came up to me yesterday. We're planning on going to Disney World in May. And he came up to me yesterday and he said, Dad, I'm so glad that you and Mom work for us so that you can take us to Disney. I said, it's true. That's how we make money to go to Disney World. All right. The third one is quality time. Just spending quality time with one another. And, like right now, Enoch's finally learning how to play, more mature games, like card games and stuff. And he just loves it. Even though we're hardly dialoguing, hardly doing anything, he just always wants to play a game now. So that's quality time I spend with him. And with your little kids, with Ethan and Emma, quality time sometimes is they're in there playing with their toys in funny little ways, and they're in their imaginary land. I just come and sit on the ground with them, and I join them. And I try to become like a child for them for a little bit of time. It's so vital that we play with our kids. It's so vital that we're not just always the adult and you're the kid. And those are your kid things that you do. No, we're supposed to become like children. And it's so vital to them and so important to them. They love it when we play with them. They love it. So quality time. The fourth is gifts. Giving gifts. This has never been a big one to me. My wife and I share the same account. And in 8 years of marriage, amidst Valentine's Day and Mother's Day and Father's Day and anniversaries and birthdays, I think we've gotten each other a total of maybe 10 gifts apiece in all that time. Neither of us, it's not our love language. And we decided that first year of marriage, we're like, just don't really care. Like, if we want to get something, let's talk about it, see if it's in the budget, and we'll buy it. And but every once in a while, it's still been nice to surprise one another. But for some people, gifts are a huge deal. And that's perfectly fine. It's something that means a lot to you. That's perfectly fine. And then the last one is physical affection. That's my love language. As you all know, I'm constantly hugging you. And everything inside of me is wanting to show you that love as I hug you. It is one of my love languages, and it's not my wife's love language. So we've had to learn to give and take. We've had to learn to give and take, and I've had to learn that just because she wants your space, it doesn't mean she doesn't love me. Okay? And that's why I produce little kids, and I just get to feed them. That was their sole purpose, is for me. But my point in all of these 5 things is, your kids are going to develop a different one that really speaks to them the most. But my point is, you should be bombarding your kids with every one of those love languages. Not a one should be lacking. Your kids should receive constant flow of every one of those. Affirming words should be constant. Acts of service, quality time, gifts, and physical affection. You should be bombarding your kids. Even if you're not that physical one, it doesn't matter. You make sure you're giving them physical affection because it might be their love language, right? It's not about you. You might say, well, I'm not that lovey-dovey one. It doesn't matter. What if that's your child's love language? Then give them that physical affection, even if it makes you a little uncomfortable. Does that make sense? Because it's not about you, it's about your child. Because you want them to feel overwhelmed and loved by you. And you guys, it's the overwhelming love that we show our kids that makes the discipline easier. When your child feels absolutely overwhelmed and loved and is getting all those love languages constantly poured into them, then when you have to discipline, it doesn't hurt them as badly. It still hurts. Discipline's never fun. It's never nice. It's never a wonderful thing. Your kid's never rejoicing over it, right? Discipline's not fun. But if you are a person who's belittling your kids, if you are a person who's not giving them those affirming things, even if you say, well, I don't do this and this and this to my kids, so I'm not hurting them, but if you're not constantly pouring all those love languages into them, then what's going to happen is you're just kind of in a neutral ground. Like, man, my kids should know I love them. I do all this stuff for them, but I don't explain it to them. I'm not giving them those affirming words. I'm not giving them physical affection. And what happens is, when you give discipline, that's all they start to remember, is the discipline. Because they're not getting that overwhelming flow of love from you. Does that make sense? Yes. This is vital. You guys, we got to get this. Our kids are precious. They are precious. They're one of the greatest gifts here on earth that we get to taste of. They're one of the greatest glimpses into heaven. They are beautiful and amazing, and we have to cherish them. We're going to do a little evaluation of ourselves today. Does the way you treat your child, particularly when you're upset about something, look like this? When you're upset with your child, when you're mad, when they've pushed your buttons the wrong way all day, when you're upset, you're having a rough day, your day's been bad, your day's been lousy, love is patient and kind. Are you still patient and kind even when you have to give discipline? Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. That's what I said earlier. There's a difference between being stern with a kid and straight up being rude, straight up being a jerk. There's a big difference. And so I'm not talking about the nice lovey-dovey times when your kid's being a saint, but when your kid's being a little devil, are you patient and kind? This is your mandate, and this is why I said obedient parents yield obedient children. Because if we will obey God in the hard times with our kids, it will yield obedience in them. Are we patient and kind? Are we not arrogant and rude to them? So sometimes we read these verses, and for some reason we just think of it as like, oh, out at work and like other people I meet. No, if this cannot be applied to your home life, then your religion is false, your relationship with God has got some issues, and you're on rocky ground. Sorry, that's harsh, that's intense, but it's the truth. It's the truth. That is primary place, and that is the primary call of everyone on your life. I have a call as a pastor. My greatest call is to love my children and love my wife. That's my greatest call. They are foremost in my life. I remember Grandpa sharing one time as he was getting into the ministry, he was talking to another minister, and the minister said, you spend all your time in the ministry, all your time at church, because that's for God, and God will take care of your family. And Grandpa said, no, that's not going to fly with me. Like, I will spend time in ministry as God calls me, but I have a responsibility to love my family. I have a responsibility to get home to them and to leave work at work. And, like I said last week, I have a responsibility to you guys to speak the word and to love you and to bring correction if I need to and to bring lots of affirming words, but the rest is on you. I got a family I got to take care of, and God has given them to me first and foremost. Make sense? It is not irritable. Stepping on my own toes right there. I realized, I'm always saying, try my heart, oh God, see that my intentions are pure, see that I'm walking before you in holiness. I want to walk before him in holiness. And, as I was doing that one day, I realized the one biggest battleground in my life right now, I feel like I'm not walking in any blatant sin that I can see, but I said, Lord, it seems to be a daily struggle not to get irritated with my kids. And I don't want that. I want you to help me. I want you to fix me, and I recognize that. Not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. That whole day with your kids. And love never ends. Guys, we can discipline our kids in love. do not discipline your kids in anger. David in the Psalm said, be angry, but don't sin in your anger. There's nothing wrong with anger. It's not a sin to be angry about something. But to act out a sin because of that anger, that's where you have sinned. Okay? With that action. It's okay to be angry about things. I'm angry about sex trafficking with kids. Does that make you angry? That makes me angry. That's okay to be angry about things like that. But discipline with your kids should never be done in anger. Discipline is supposed to be a matter of fact. It's something that you have to do even though you would rather not do it. And I think we can all find that place. And it's like, of course I'd rather not discipline my kid. Of course I'd rather everything's going well and I don't have to discipline. So we all understand that, but sometimes that does not translate to our child. If you discipline them in anger, they are not seeing that. I've shared this before, but when I was in trouble as a kid, and again, this is why I had the greatest parents ever. If I did something that the punishment has to fit the crime, right? Okay? Sometimes a kid just needs a talking to. Spanking is not the only way to go. You need a bunch of stuff on your tool belt. Yeah, your tool belt. You need a whole bunch of different tools, not just a hammer, right? That doesn't work for more intricate things. And sometimes our kids are more intricate. It's not always the spanking that's going to fix it. Okay? But there's nothing wrong with spankings. I'm not against it. And I needed them as a kid. Josh didn't need them. He got a talking to and he was like, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. And he didn't. He's been perfect ever since. But I needed lots of spankings. I did. Because the talking to me, it didn't affect me. I was like, I don't care. Forget about your feelings. Like, that's what I'm thinking inside. I don't care about your feelings. I needed a spanking. I needed something to get through to me, to wake me up. But I'd be sent to my room, and I'd do something wrong. Dad would send me to my room. He'd come in a little bit, and this is literally how it would go almost every time. Joel, this is what you did. He'd list it out. That was wrong. It was hurtful, and you don't seem to understand that. I'm going to give you a spanking. And this is how he would be talking. No anger. Just a matter of fact, I have to do this. And he'd even say sometimes, I don't want to do this, but I don't know what else is going to teach you this. And then he would say, after I spank you, I can sit here and hold you, and you can cry, or you can have time alone. Which one do you want? He'd give me that option, and I'd tell him, I'd get my spanking, and that's it. There was no anger involved in it. So it's absolutely possible to discipline your children as a matter of fact, a matter of this has been done wrong, there must be a consequence, but I love you. And it's not done in anger. Does that make sense?
Yes.
This is just practical stuff that's really important. I've got to get to this before we do question and answer. Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die. Now this is addressing, obviously Solomon isn't talking about picking up a rod and hitting your kid, because they might die if you do that, actually, blow to the head. But he is addressing, and we've seen this with parents sometimes, like, oh, I just can't do that to my kid. Oh, they're going to cry. And he's saying, they're not going to die. And I can attest to that. I received a lot of spankings. I might have beat Alyssa as far as how many spankings were received. I'm not dead. And I appreciate it now. So I'm just attesting to that even though they caused me that pain, it was okay, I didn't die. Let's go ahead and play that clip.
Randy will be
Yeah.
trying to.
Computer. It's down at the bottom doing something. Oh, connected.
Or not.
Get it right?
The mouse doesn't want there.
My school is a model of discipline. Use the rod, beat the child. That's my motto.
Terrific motto.
You have wrapped yourself.
Yeah, I got a boy, Mikey, and one mistake, Matilda.
They're all mistakes, children. Filthy, nasty things. Glad I never was one.
I think Dad is looking from heaven proud of me today, because I used my first movie clip in a message. Yeah, don't have that attitude. You weren't supposed to take a lesson from that. So not to be jerks. I gotta wrap it up. It's all really good. It's all burning in my heart. So we're gonna have a fun time talking about parenting and learning a lot. And we're gonna get introspective. And I want you actually, a lot of you have phones now that you can take notes on. But in weeks to come, I'm gonna have a time where so if it's easier for you to write it down, I'm gonna have a time where we write down mistakes we've made as parents. And then in another column where we write down all the good stuff we've done as parents too. And I want to get a good balance. And I just want us to get introspective about this and just evaluate ourselves as parents and to be okay with the mistakes we've made. And eventually, I don't know how many weeks we're going to do this, but we're going to have a time where we dismiss the kids early, and we're going to sit with them as families. And your job when that day comes is not to bring up anything your kids have done to you. And this can be your teenage kids too that are out here. But your job as parents is going to be to apologize to them for the wrongs you have done. Not bringing up anything they've done, but apologize to them. And this can apply to those of you whose kids aren't back there. You can call your kids on the phone. You can call your adult kids on the phone. You can send them a text message. But we're just going to take a time to do that. And for those who don't have kids at all, you're just going to be in prayer during that time. And maybe get adopted into a family or something. So, Mother, come on up here for these last 10 minutes, 11 minutes. We're just going to have some question and answer time because I can go over a lot of stuff, but kids are really intricate. And you guys have come up with some interesting situations, hopefully, that you have questions on. And this doesn't have to apply to your own kids. It could be like, this could happen one day. What do I do during it? So, yeah, when they ask the question. Who has the question?
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Nope.
Hello, hello. Oh, okay. There's a family that I know, and trying to figure out a way to minister to them, and the father acts very badly towards a teenage child on a regular basis, and will apologize, but then will go ahead and do it again. So he's lost his credibility. What can I say to that family?
Teenage question. I don't do teenage question.
Well, do you have a relationship where you can speak into this person's life? You're close enough to them? Well, then I would, with much prayer, pull them aside sometime, or them as a couple, and just share this, let them know all the positive, amazing things that you see that they're doing with their kids, with their family, but that this one area is something that you would like to encourage them to grow in. And again, you really need to pray and make sure that the Lord wants you to speak it, because sometimes it's just something that we pray about. And we're that person that's there for that kid when they come, that's not going to say bad things about their dad, but going to encourage them about how much their parent loves them, but that their parent makes mistakes as well, and encouraging them to talk to their dad about it. Sometimes not in the middle of an argument, but, sometime for them to go and talk to their dad about how that affects them when they just keep doing the same thing over and over. But so it's a teachable moment for you with the kid to let them know that, parents can have areas that they struggle with over and over, and the fact that the dad is apologizing means that he is trying to deal with it. So you really just need to pray and have the Holy Spirit lead you, but I would start by just being that person there for the kid. But again, leading them back to their parents and loving their parents.
And I would encourage, too, to the father that, if you're seeing that they are apologizing, and then having to apologize again, that even an openness of, because he has that capacity to go and apologize. So that's showing something. That's good. But even encouraging them, if you ever do have that talk, to to actually talk to their kid and explain to their kid, like, hey, I'm sorry that I repeatedly do this. It's a struggle that I have, and I'm trying to work on it. Because sometimes that openness with a kid can be so amazing. Instead of just seeing the offense happen time and time again, when we actually share, like, I have struggles too. Like when we share that as a parent, I've done that many times with the youth, just apologized on behalf of adults, on behalf of parents, that we can be jerks, but that's the thing. We were all kids once too, and we grew up, and we have our own issues. And so just encouraging him to have that openness with that teenage son or daughter, whatever you said it was, to just say, like, hey, I'm sorry that I've done that so many times, but I recognize it. It's something that I struggle with. So just that openness can help bring healing some too. Anybody else? Question?
I have problems being attacked by the enemy a lot, and I get caught up in the moment. I pray before and I can pray after, but I want to be able to be there in the moment to where, even though I've been married, I feel like I've been a single parent, and my kids know where my buttons are. So it hurts me when they do that, okay? And then anger sets in, and I get the enemy comes to me and goes, well, your kids know you better than anybody, and why are they deliberately doing that? So then you're resentful. Okay, I don't want to be like that either. So all the above, none of it's good. Okay, none of it's good from the beginning to the end, and I like to prevent it from happening.
Yep. All right. So one thing that I always, me and Mallory have talked about is that our job as parents is to be like a solid rock. That your kid should not be able to push your buttons and cause you to have anger. That I want to be that solid rock that even if my son said, Dad, I hate you, I could say, that's fine, I love you. To not let it affect me, because even though that might be hard to do, but again, you're acknowledging, hey, I need help with it, so continue to ask help of God for it. But that's what I want my son to see, because we're supposed to be the example of God to our children. And so when we rant with God and stuff, he doesn't turn back and punch us and say, well, you're an idiot too, right? So my job as a parent, if my son even says something like that, is not even to come down harsh. And again, every kid's going to be a little different. And my kids already have said things before where they're like, you're mean, or you're a jerk, or you're ugly, things like that, And my job is not to respond like, oh my gosh, like that was so terrible what you did, but to just simply say like, okay, that's fine that you think that. I don't think that about you. I think you're wonderful, and I wouldn't say that to anyone, because that could be really hurtful. And I try to bring it more to a heart level of, that kind of hurts me when you say that, but it's okay that you said it, but I love you. And again, every kid is going to be different, but one of the big things is to try to not let them push your button, because what's going to happen is if we return the insults in kind, it's not helping anything. Yeah, and our job is that we have our buttons, and that's fine. It's okay that we have our buttons that can be pressed. But our job, again, and you're already doing that, you're praying and stuff, but even if you need to get alone and release that stuff to God for it first before you come back and address it. Because you, as a parent, know where their buttons are too. And so we don't want to be just going back and forth pressing buttons. Okay? I want to be that solid one that they realize, oh wow, I can say whatever I want, and it doesn't faze Dad. He still just loves me, and it doesn't get to him. Because that's why they know where our buttons are. They've pressed and tried everywhere, and then they found where they get a rise out of us. So our goal is to never show them that place that they get a rise out of us. And say, no, I'm a solid rock of love, and I'll bring discipline if I need to.
Well, and I was just thinking what he said, be slow to speak. The word tells us to be slow to speak. So if you know that that's something that happens, you let your kids know that that's, but sometimes I'm not going to say anything because I need time to process it before I speak. And that's okay. Oh yeah, that's okay. And I want to say to you, parents of younger kids, like Joel said, kids love to push buttons and see lights go off. And I have a very dear friend that I have said this to multiple times. You are just giving him the time of his life. Because every time he's pushing the button, you're just, all the bells and whistles are going off. And it's like, that just causes the kid to go back to that toy more and more. You know, the toys that aren't working, that aren't broken, they just leave those alone. And they especially like mom's phones and the buttons on her phone. So, really, really, and again, it's like, not taking it personal, not being offended
That's good.
by what our kids say. Because their whole, where they should be processing all their anger and everything is where they feel safe. And that's why they're doing it with you, is because they know that you're going to love them no matter what. That's why your kids can be angels at someone else's house and clean the whole house and do all this stuff, and then they come home and you're like, my kid? And it's because they can be, just like you can be yourself in front of your spouse, and you will say things that you wouldn't say and behave in ways you wouldn't behave. It's because you feel comfortable and loved. So that's a good thing, that your kids feel comfortable and loved. And the more we are, like Joel said, that rock, that doesn't faze me. I love you regardless. The more your kids are gonna learn and grow through all their anger and stuff with you instead of acting it out somewhere else. So
It's good. That's all we got time for today. We'll probably do it each week if you guys enjoy that. I like question and answer time and do it with the youth all the time. So let's end in prayer. Lord, we just thank you so much for this awesome day, and we praise you for our kids. What a beautiful, amazing gift that you have given us to enjoy here on earth. And God, we, even today, God, help us for all of those, including me, God, that still have our own wants and desires and dreams, and the kids ruined that. God, I just ask that we would yield that at your feet and recognize that it's not about us, that these are precious children that you've given us. I just remember getting Enoch and thinking, how am I so privileged to have a little human being to take care of? That's insane. And God, we just thank you for it. We thank you for our children, and may, as we go through this series, may they just become more and more precious in our minds, and may we become better and better obedient parents. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.